Garrett Blake didn't expect his Saturday morning to start with his 6-year-old son crying over a broken cereal bowl and end with him lifting a velvet armchair into the back of a stranger's SUV. But Garrett's life hadn't followed expectations in years. "Daddy, I didn't mean to drop it," Jackson sniffled, holding the jagged piece of ceramic like it was a shattered treasure. Garrett crouched and wiped his son's cheek. "Hey, nobody's mad. It's just a bowl. We've got like one more left." Jackson giggled through his sniffles. Garrett forced a smile, ruffling his dark hair. They were late for the flea market, the one place where Garrett could stretch what was left of his paycheck and maybe find a used dresser that didn't reek of mildew by 10 a.m. The sun was hot and the crowd thick. Garrett held Jackson's hand tightly as they weaved through rows of beat-up furniture and chipped lamps. "Daddy, that couch looks like Grandma's." "That's because it probably is," Garrett muttered, eyeing a floral monstrosity. He was about to move on when he heard a thud and a sharp "oh" from behind a nearby truck. A woman in a white t-shirt and jeans stood awkwardly trying to lift a mid-century coffee table into the back of her black SUV. She clearly had no clue what she was doing. Garrett's instincts kicked in. "Hey, need a hand?" The woman turned. She was striking long dark hair pulled into a low ponytail, sunglasses perched on her head and a small bruise forming on her shin. "Honestly, yes," she said, laughing. "This thing weighs more than I do." Garrett grinned and hoisted the table with one arm. "Where do you want it?" "Back seats down, just wherever it fits." Jackson climbed up beside the SUV and stared. "That's a fancy car." The woman smiled at him. "You must be the boss." Jackson nodded proudly. "I am," Garrett chuckled. "We're just here hunting for cheap furniture." "His room needs a dresser." "Well, you've got good taste," she said, brushing her hands. "I'm Olivia. Thanks for the help, Garrett, and that's Jackson." "Hi, Jackson," she said, crouching to his level. "You helping your dad today?" Jackson beamed. "He helps me more. He even makes pancakes." "With chocolate chips," Olivia laughed. "Sounds like a keeper." Garrett rubbed the back of his neck. "I try." She opened her wallet and pulled out a 20. "At least let me give you something for your help." He put his hand up. "No way." "I'm not taking money for lifting a table." She tilted her head. "Then let me buy you both lunch. There's a food truck over there." Jackson gasped. "Tacos?" Garrett looked at Olivia, then at his son's pleading eyes. "One taco." "One each," Olivia corrected with a wink, already walking toward the truck. They sat under a shaded tent, Olivia across from Garrett and Jackson between them, devouring a taco like it was the first real food he'd had in a week. Which, honestly, wasn't far off. "So what do you do, Garrett?" Olivia asked, sipping lemonade. Garrett hesitated. "Used to be a construction foreman, company folded. Now I do odd jobs, handyman stuff, whatever pays." She nodded slowly. "That's honest work." He smiled, surprised she didn't flinch or look away like most people did when he said that. "What about you?" he asked. "I'm in management," she said casually, brushing crumbs from her lap. He raised an eyebrow. "Like HR?" "Something like that." She changed the subject so smoothly he didn't push. She seemed like someone used to being in control of conversations. Still, she laughed easy, listened when Jackson talked about dinosaurs, and didn't look bored once. That alone made her different. As they finished eating, Olivia stood and looked hesitant for the first time. "Actually, I have one more piece I'm trying to load. It's kind of a beast. I hate to ask again." Garrett stood to lead the way. It was a huge walnut dresser, clearly antique and worth more than Garrett's car. He grunted as he lifted it into the SUV. "You sure you're not secretly a superhero?" Olivia asked. "No cape, just dad's strength." She looked at him for a long second, something unreadable in her expression. "Thank you," he shrugged. "Glad to help." Garrett started to wave goodbye, but Jackson beat him to it. "Bye, Miss Olivia, come to our house." Garrett flushed. "Sorry, he's got no filter." Olivia laughed. "That's okay, he's charming. Maybe I will." They walked away, Jackson skipping, and Garrett looked back once. She was still standing there, watching them like she wasn't quite ready to leave. He didn't know her last name, didn't know where she lived, or that she owned the top floor of a skyscraper downtown. All he knew was that for the first time in a long time, someone looked at him like he wasn't just a guy barely holding it together. And that maybe, just maybe, he'd see her again. Garrett didn't expect to see Olivia again. People like her didn't circulate twice through his orbit. But 2 days later, as he stood outside his latest job repainting a weather-worn front porch on the outskirts of town, her SUV pulled up to the curb like a scene from a dream he hadn't dared to have. She stepped out, sunglasses in hand, her dark hair swept over one shoulder. This time she wore slate gray slacks and a soft blue blouse, the kind of outfit no one wore near splintered wood and peeling paint. "Garrett," she called, walking toward him with a cautious smile. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he blinked, setting down his brush. "Not unless you're here to file a noise complaint." "I figured I owed you more than tacos," she said, nodding toward the porch. "Mind if I ask how much you're charging for this?" He tilted his head. "Enough to cover groceries twice if I'm lucky," her gaze held his. "What if I offered you something that didn't involve splinters or sunburn?" Garrett crossed his arms. "I'm listening." "I have a property that needs work, not just paint, repairs, fixtures, the whole thing." She hesitated. "It's a personal project." "Not a corporate one." "Corporate?" he asked, frowning. "I told you I manage things. What I didn't say is, I run a company, I'm the CEO. He stared at her for a second. "Of what?" "Evergreen development. We buy, restore, and flip high-end properties." Garrett let out a low whistle. "That's not HR. "No," she said, lips twitching. "It's not. But this place I'm talking about, it's not one of the flips. It's a family home, my grandmother's. I inherited it and I want to restore it, not sell it." He studied her, unsure whether this was a job offer or something else. "Why me?" he asked. "You didn't take my money, didn't ask questions, and you didn't treat me different when I was just some woman struggling with a coffee table." "I treat everyone the same." "Exactly." He looked down at his paint-streaked hands, then back at her. "I'd have to bring Jackson," she nodded. "Of course, there's a big yard. He can run around while we work." I want to help," she said quietly. "I don't want to just hand it off. I want to be part of making it whole again." Garrett didn't answer right away. He wasn't used to people offering anything without a catch, especially not people who owned property portfolios and drove cars that cost more than his entire street. Finally, he nodded. "Where is it?" "About 20 minutes from here. I can take you now. Or tomorrow if you need time." He glanced at the half-painted porch. "I can finish this tonight," she smiled. "I'll text you the address." "I don't have a smartphone," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Just one of those old flip ones, barely gets reception." Her brows lifted. "Then how about I pick you both up tomorrow morning?" "Deal." As she turned to go, she paused. "Can I ask something?" "Sure." "What do you want, Garrett? Long term, I mean." He looked out toward the road, then back at her. "A safe home, stability for my son. Enough work to keep our heads above water, that's all." She nodded slowly, like she was weighing his answer. "Tomorrow morning. 9 sharp." When she drove away, Garrett stood in the driveway for a long while, heart thudding against his ribs, not from attraction, though that was there, fierce and rising, but from the shift he felt in the air. A woman like Olivia didn't come into a man's life unless something was about to change. The next morning, Olivia arrived exactly at 9. Jackson was already waiting on the porch with a backpack full of snacks and coloring books. Garrett had cleaned himself up: clean jeans, a pressed shirt, and boots that didn't leak. "Ready?" she asked as Jackson climbed into the back seat. "As I'll ever be," Garrett said, closing the door behind them. The drive took them past rolling fields and into a quiet neighborhood surrounded by old trees. Olivia pulled up in front of a white 2-story home with faded shutters and a porch swing hanging lopsided by one chain. "This was hers," she said softly as they stepped out. "My grandmother's. She raised me here." Garrett looked up at the house. "It's got good bones. Better than mine most days," she said with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Inside, the house smelled of dust and lemon oil. The floors creaked and the wallpaper was peeling, but Garrett saw what she did: a place worth saving. He turned to her. "Where do we start?" She handed him a clipboard. "I made a list." Garrett scanned it. "You went room by room." "I don't like surprises," she said. "I do," Jackson piped up from the entryway. "Surprises are the best." Olivia smiled down at him. "Then let's surprise this house by making it beautiful again." They started in the kitchen. While Garrett inspected the cracked tile and loose cabinet hinges, Olivia rolled up her sleeves and started clearing out old drawers. "You're not afraid of getting your hands dirty?" he said, watching her toss out a nest of expired spices. You don't get far in my world if you're afraid of much. What is your world exactly, besides real estate? She paused. Meetings, deadlines, boardrooms full of people who'd eat you alive if you flinched. He raised a brow. You flinch. Not anymore. They worked through the morning. Jackson played in the backyard with a stick he declared his dragon sword, and Olivia kept pace with Garrett, never complaining, never checking a phone that buzzed faintly from her bag. When they stopped for lunch, she handed him a wrapped sandwich and a cold bottle of lemonade. He took a bite, then leaned back against the counter. So what happened to your parents? Her expression didn't change, but her eyes cooled slightly. Gone, different times, different reasons. My grandmother was the only constant, Garrett nodded. Mine passed when I was 18, cancer. I was already working by then. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that came from standing in similar shadows, even if their paths had been carved through different terrain. Olivia looked away first. I want this house to feel like her again, warm, safe. Like someone still believes in it. Garrett's voice was low. Then we'll make it feel like that. Outside, Jackson's laughter rang through the yard. Olivia glanced toward the window, then back at Garrett. I think you're the first person I've trusted with something personal in a long time. I didn't ask for that. I know. That's why I did it. Garrett didn't reply. He didn't have to. For the first time in years, someone had handed him more than a task. She'd handed him a piece of herself. And he intended to take care of it. By the third week working on the house, Garrett knew every creaking floorboard and splintered step like the lines on his own hands. What he hadn't expected was how familiar Olivia had become in just as short a time. She didn't just show up, she was present. Focused, and every day she surprised him. One afternoon, she arrived in jeans and a faded denim shirt with a tool belt slung low on her hips. Garrett had just finished reinforcing a sagging beam in the entryway ceiling when she stepped inside, a bag dangling from her wrist. You're early, he said, brushing dust from his forearm. I brought lunch, and possibly the best apple pie in the state. She set the bag down on a covered table. You've been here since 7. No one works through lunch on my watch. He gestured toward the exposed beam. Couldn't stop in the middle, it would have collapsed. She tilted her head. So collapse after you eat, come on. They sat on the back porch where the railing still needed to be replaced. Jackson was in the shade with watercolors, humming to himself as he painted what looked like a purple dinosaur chasing a spaceship. I looked up the beam specs you mentioned yesterday, Olivia said, pulling the pie out of its box. You were right. That corner shouldn't have held another winter. Garrett raised a brow. You looked up structural specs. I like knowing what I'm talking about, she replied, handing him a fork, and I don't like being wrong. He took a bite, surprised by the flavor. This is from that bakery on Maple, she grinned. You know it. Only place I ever splurged on my birthday. Thought they closed. They reopened under new owners. One of my projects, actually. I helped them secure the financing. Garrett looked at her carefully. You ever sleep? Not when I'm interested in something. And are you interested in this house or the work? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she watched Jackson dip his brush in green paint and swirl it across a page. Both, she said at last. But I'll be honest, it's not just about the house anymore. Not for me. Garrett set down his fork. What does that mean? She looked at him directly. It means I think about this place when I'm not here. I think about you and him and how this all feels. Different from anything I've built before. Garrett exhaled slowly. You're not used to slow things, are you? No, but I'm learning. They sat in silence for a few seconds, filled only by Jackson's gentle humming. When Olivia stood, she dusted flour from her shirt and picked up a measuring tape from the porch rail. I want to turn the attic into a reading nook, she said. Built-in shelves, maybe a window seat. Be a good place to hide from the world, Garrett replied. Or finally look at it. They spent the afternoon working side by side. Garrett handled the more technical repairs while Olivia tackled the attic layout, sketching ideas on a notepad with sharp, deliberate lines. Occasionally, she'd ask his opinion, and he'd offer it without hesitation. Somewhere in the middle of sanding a warped stair tread, he realized she genuinely wanted his input not out of politeness, but because she respected it. When the sun began dipping behind the trees, Olivia wiped her hands on a cloth and walked over to Jackson, who had fallen asleep in the grass with his painting beside him. "I'll carry him," Garrett offered. She nodded, brushing a blade of grass from Jackson's shirt. "He trusts you." "Fully, he's all I've got," Garrett said as he lifted his son gently. "I can't afford to be anything but solid." As they stepped inside, Olivia turned toward him without warning. "Would you ever consider leaving this town?" He stopped. "Why? I'm not asking you to, I just want to understand what you'd walk away from and what you wouldn't." He looked around the house, then down at his sleeping son. "I'd go anywhere that felt like a future, but I wouldn't go unless it was safe for him. Stable. And for you." "I stopped thinking about what I wanted years ago." Olivia's voice was soft. "Maybe it's time you started again." That night, after she dropped them off, Garrett found himself standing on his front porch long after she'd driven away. He watched the stars blink above the cracked roofline and thought about the way she'd looked at him, not like a man broken by circumstance, but like someone worth rebuilding with. Inside, Jackson stirred in bed, murmuring something about pie and dragons. Garrett closed the door gently behind him and leaned against it. He didn't know what Olivia was to him yet, but he knew this she wasn't temporary, and he was starting to wonder if he could believe in more than just survival. If maybe, just maybe, he could believe in her. By mid-October, the house was nearly finished. The last coat of paint had dried on the front door that morning, and the attic's new window seat overlooked the turning leaves like it had always belonged there. Garrett stood in the upstairs hallway, tool bag slung over one shoulder, when Olivia appeared in the doorway behind him. "You're quiet," she said. He turned, eyes scanning her face. "Just thinking. Good thoughts or the kind that keep you up at night?" "A little of both." She stepped into the room slowly, her hand brushing the door frame. "I have to leave town this weekend, business trip. I wouldn't go if it wasn't important." He nodded once. "I get it. You're in charge of a whole empire." "I thought I was building it alone," she said, voice low. "But now I'm not sure if that's what I want anymore." Garrett leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You're not the only one asking yourself that." She hesitated, then moved closer. "There's a dinner Friday night. It's formal. I was going to go alone, but now I want you there, both of you." His brows lifted. "You want Jackson at a corporate dinner?" Her lips twitched. "No, I arranged for a sitter. Someone from my team who's been cleared and background checked 6 ways from Sunday." He studied her, then nodded slowly. "All right." Friday came with a chill in the air. Garrett stood outside the hotel Olivia had described, adjusting the unfamiliar suit jacket she'd had delivered that morning. Jackson had stayed behind with the sitter, already knee-deep in board games and popcorn by the time they left. When Olivia stepped out of the car, she wore a sleek navy gown that shimmered under the lights. Her hair was swept up, a diamond pin catching the light at her temple. Garrett couldn't look away. "You clean up dangerously well," she murmured, eyes scanning him. He offered his arm. "I could say the same." Inside the ballroom, everything gleamed. Waiters moved like clockwork, crystal chandeliers sparkled above them, and Olivia's name echoed through conversations around the room. Garrett felt the weight of it, all the way people glanced, nodded, whispered. "You sure I belong in here?" he asked under his breath. Olivia squeezed his hand. "I've never been more certain of anything." The speeches were long, the food forgettable, but the way Olivia's hand found his beneath the table made it bearable. When she was called up to the podium to accept an award for innovation in sustainable development, Garrett watched the way she stood, confident, composed, commanding. But when she looked out into the crowd and found him, her eyes softened. Afterward, they stepped out onto the hotel balcony, the city lights stretching out below them. "I've been meaning to ask you something," she said, arms folded against the breeze. Garrett turned to her. "Go on." "I bought the house next door to the one we restored. It's smaller, needs less work. But it's solid and empty." He blinked. "You're flipping that too?" "No, I want you and Jackson to have it." He stared at her. "Olivia, I can't accept something like that. That's not a gift, it's a life." "I know exactly what it is," she said quietly. "And I know exactly who I want living there." He looked down, jaw tight. "I don't want to be someone you rescue. You never were," she said. "You're someone I chose, and yeah, I've got resources. I can't change that, but I'm not offering you a handout. I'm offering you a home." Beside me, he turned to her, eyes searching hers. Why me? Because when I met you, you didn't know who I was, and you helped me anyway. Because you've treated every broken thing in that house with more care than most people treat each other. Because you look at Jackson like he's your entire world, and because I'm in love with you." He didn't speak right away. The night spun around them in silence, then he stepped forward, cupped her face in both hands and kissed her, slow, certain. Like something he'd been holding back finally broke free. When they pulled apart, he whispered, "I don't care where we live, as long as we're with you." They returned to the house the next day to pack up the last of the supplies. Jackson ran through the halls one more time, arms outstretched like airplane wings, while Olivia leaned against the staircase railing and watched Garrett fit the final toolbox into his truck. "You know," she said, voice teasing, "I still owe you for that coffee table." He turned, wiping his hands on a rag. "I think you paid me back." "Not yet." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. He opened it slowly, brows drawing together as he read. "What is this?" "A title transfer," she said. "To the house. I bought it in Jackson's name. It'll be his when he's old enough." He stared at her, stunned. "Olivia, I wanted him to have something that couldn't be taken away, something that says he matters. That he belongs." He stepped forward, eyes shining. "You didn't have to, but I wanted to. I've never had anyone do something like this for me before. You do now." Garrett pulled her into his arms and she rested her head against his chest. Later that week, they moved into the house next door. Jackson picked out the blue paint for his room and Garrett rebuilt the porch swing himself, perfectly leveled this time. Olivia brought home fresh flowers every Sunday and made pancakes every other weekend, laughing when she burned them and Jackson begged for Garrett's instead. They still worked together sometimes on other projects, houses that needed new life, buildings left for dead. But no matter where they went, they always came back to the little house with the attic window seat and the dragon paintings taped to the fridge. Garrett never asked what he did to deserve her. He just loved her the way she loved him with everything he had. And when he finally knelt on one knee under the oak tree behind their home, holding out a slim gold ring with a quiet, "You've already given me everything," Olivia said yes, before he could even finish the question. They married the following spring in the backyard, with Jackson carrying the rings and a sky full of blossoms above them. It wasn't the life Garrett had expected. It was better. The morning sun filtered through the trees, casting golden light across the backyard where Garrett was kneeling beside a half-finished planter box. His hands, rough from years of labor, moved with careful precision as he secured the last board. Behind him, the soft rustle of footsteps in the grass made him glance up. Olivia stood there in a pale green dress that brushed her knees, holding two mugs, one of coffee, one of cocoa. Her eyes found his as she crossed the yard. "I still don't know how you make this place look better every week," she said, handing him the coffee. He took it with a nod of thanks. "It's not the wood, it's the soil. Everything grows better where roots feel safe." She crouched beside him, peering at the row of lavender they'd planted together 2 days earlier. "And what about people?" He glanced sideways at her. "Same rule applies." Her smile was quiet, thoughtful. "I've been thinking about something." Garrett leaned back on his heels. "Is this the kind of thinking that means I need to cancel the rest of my afternoon?" "No," she laughed, nudging his knee. "It's the kind that means I want to expand the business, not the company, not Evergreen." "Us," he set the mug down in the grass. "Go on." "I want to fix more than just houses. I want to work with families like yours, single parents, veterans, people who have been overlooked. I want to take the resources I have and build something lasting, together." He studied her face for a long moment. "You're serious?" "I've already started the paperwork. A community restoration fund. You'd be the head contractor. I've already got the first property in mind." He frowned. "That's a lot of trust." She reached for his hand. "I already gave you my heart." "This is just the next step." Garrett wrapped his fingers around hers. "Then let's build it." Inside, Jackson was in the kitchen with a makeshift crown on his head and a cape fashioned from a blanket. He looked up as they entered, crossing his arms like a miniature king. "You're late," he declared. Olivia raised a brow. "Late for what?" "For the royal breakfast meeting. I made pancakes." Garrett pulled her chair out, bowing with exaggerated formality. "Shall we, my queen?" She settled into the seat, laughing. Lead the way, Your Majesty. After breakfast, they drove to the small community center on the edge of town. The building had been boarded up for years, the windows clouded with dust, the trim flaking away in long strips of paint. But Olivia's eyes lit as she stepped from the car. "This is it," she said. "The first project." Garrett walked the perimeter, mentally cataloging the repairs. "We'll need to rewire the whole place, reinforce the foundation, tear out the mold in the back wing." "I already spoke to the city," she said. "They're willing to match a portion of the restoration costs if we open it to public services after school programs, job training, that kind of thing." He turned to her slowly. "You're not just restoring this for show, you actually want to be here in this." She locked eyes with him. "I want to make roots, with you, with Jackson, with this town." He reached for her hand, squeezing it once. "Then let's start drawing up plans." Over the next 2 months, the center transformed. Garrett hired a small team of local workers, many struggling with steady employment, and taught them as they built. Olivia handled the paperwork, the permits, the negotiations with city officials. But every day she was on site, paint in her hair, clipboard in hand, never missing a beat. Jackson started first grade that fall. He ran home every afternoon with construction paper drawings for Garrett and questions for Olivia about how buildings stood without falling over. They built him a small desk in the back office of the center where he could color while they worked. One crisp November evening, the three of them stood beneath the newly installed lights outside the center. The sign above the door read, "The Willow Foundation." Olivia traced the edge of the lettering. "My grandmother had a willow tree outside her bedroom window. She used to say those trees bend but never break." Garrett wrapped his arm around her waist. "Sounds familiar." She tilted her head against his shoulder. "You remember the first day we met?" He laughed. "You mean when you almost dropped a coffee table on your foot?" "I remember thinking a man who helps without asking for anything is either dangerous or exactly what I need." He kissed her temple. "You turned out to be both." The ribbon-cutting ceremony the next week brought the entire town. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years stood shoulder to shoulder, watching as Garrett handed Jackson the oversized scissors. The boy beamed as he cut the ribbon, and the doors opened to cheers and applause. As the crowd filtered inside, Olivia and Garrett lingered on the porch. "This year changed everything," she said. He nodded. "I didn't believe in second chances, not really, but you made me want to." "I didn't fix you," she said softly. "You were never broken." He caught her face in his hands. "You just reminded me I could still build something. Something that lasts." Their kiss was unhurried, deep, filled with a certainty that hadn't needed to be spoken. It was written in every brick they'd laid together, every late night hammering out plans, every quiet morning over coffee on the porch. Years later, long after the paint had faded and the garden had bloomed more times than they could count, they would sit on that very same porch, watching Jackson help repaint the center with a group of volunteers. He'd be taller then, surer in his step, already talking about studying architecture. "Looks like he caught the bug," Garrett would say, sipping his coffee. Olivia would smile at the sight of their son, sleeves rolled up, paint on his cheek. "He grew up watching love turn into something real, and he'll build his own version of it," Garrett would say, fingers brushing hers. They would look out over the neighborhood they had helped restore, the lives they had touched, and the family they had become. And they would know, without question, that they had built something unshakable. Something theirs, forever.